All right, let's go on with this personal message, which is beautifully written. Beautifully written. Yes, we had a slight problem, but that's nothing. That's just nothing. Let's get into this. Even though I didn't possess these credentials, which I do, I simply said in my last message that I consider myself to be an expert. Well, you can consider yourself to be an expert all you want. But when somebody tells you you're an expert, that's better. Much better. In these areas. No matter how many other people assure you of your expertise, it depends on who these people are. If these people have high credentials of their own, then you can trust what they're saying to you. Yes, a bum off the street can say you're an expert. But when you have somebody that has had 20 years of teaching experience and has a good reputation, and they tell you you're an expert, that means something. That means something big. Okay? No matter how many other people assure you your expertise, you can't start shunning others for not knowing what they're talking about until you actually believe for yourself that you are an expert. You start believing you are an expert when you have people that have high credentials and good reputations telling you you are an expert. That gives you that confidence. You're not getting that word from the bum off the street. You're getting that word from highly academic credentials. See the difference? All right. You can do this whether or not you are an expert by most people's standards. It's not about by most people. It's about the people that have good reputations and a lot of credentials. When people with good reputations and a lot of credentials say you're an expert, you are. There is no doubt in your mind anymore. It erases all that doubt. Okay? You may or may not be wrong, but the point is that I believe myself to be far beyond most people in these areas. Well, you can say that all you want, but when I hear that your chess teacher trusts you enough to teach the chess class, when I hear that your acting coaches really think highly of you, and those acting coaches have good reputations and good credentials, then I'm impressed. Whether or not I actually am is irrelevant. Oh, it's very relevant. I still believe myself to be above their capabilities. You can believe it all you want, but these people have said you are, and that's different. And I still listen to and consider their input despite feeling that I would know better than them. Here we go again. A fallacy. Okay, and I'll explain that. If a novice suggested to move to me at this point in my life, I could probably examine it in about half a second. I have no doubt of that. In fact, I probably will have already considered and dismissed the move in question, but considering everything before dismissing them is important. Not if the person suggesting anything to you doesn't have the proper credentials. And it doesn't matter. The thing is, it doesn't necessarily have to be his credentials. He can base it on somebody else's credentials. If somebody comes to you and they're a novice in chess and they say, look, I've read so-and-so book and this book says that move is better, that's something to listen to. But if he's just saying on his own and he's not smart enough to do apple pie, you dismiss it and you say, get lost. That's the difference. So like I said, even if he's a novice, he can pull credentials from a book. He can pull credentials from a magazine article, or from a newspaper article, or from a full-blown web presentation with somebody who actually does have credentials. So he can borrow credentials just as much as he can have his own credentials. That's the difference. Okay? Some things take a lot more consideration than others, especially if you're dealing with a life-threatening situation. And your teaching methods are something you should be constantly evaluating and refining. I evaluate and refine my teaching methods based on the response of all of my students. Not just one or two, but all of them. When I hear one has misunderstood me, I check with the others. And then, based on what all of them tell me, then I make my assessment. Or, I will put out a video deliberately. Like I said in my previous videos, I'll take a dang blasted rod and I'll stick it up a hornet's nest to see what the responses are, and then I can adjust my teaching methods accordingly. That's the difference. Okay? I don't feel that this discussion will go anywhere, considering we are both very rooted in our opinions. Well, there were a lot of things in your presentation, and as I go on, I'll show you this, that I actually agreed with. I didn't agree with everything, but I agree with a lot of what you said. Okay, so I'm not as rude as you'd like to think, but I am clearly demonstrating here that either you have the credentials to drop an honor challenge. Okay, let me say that again. Either you have the credentials to drop an honor challenge, or you borrow those credentials from somebody else to then drop an honor challenge. Either way, you can still win. Jeff Bliss did neither of these things. He didn't even consult me before going after this teacher. He'd say, hey, I don't believe she's teaching right. What do you think? And then I would put my response, because I'm qualified to do so, and he could have taken that response to that teacher and challenged her with that. Then he could have won. So either you're going to rely on your credentials or on the credentials of somebody else to win your honor challenge. Either way, you can still win. See what I mean? Especially considering how different our opinions on this topic are. Since you seem so interested, though, this is what I have to say. To start this off, I would like to establish that I do not admire Jeff Bliss in the least. We can agree on this. This is a point of agreement. Like I said, this is a good argument here. You start off by finding a point of agreement. We both agree that Jeff Bliss did not do the right thing. Maybe not for the same reasons, but we agree he didn't do the right thing. And because of what he did, he not only made it more difficult for his peers to question their teacher, but on top of that, he's made his teacher now, if you read the newspaper stories that came out afterwards, his teacher was now so afraid of what Jeff Bliss would do that she was trying to make amends with him. This is not something a real teacher would ever do. She had the perfectly good right to smash his honor challenge to bits and throw him out of the class. Period. Because he didn't bring his own credentials, and he certainly didn't bring the credentials of somebody else. With that being said, his argument's done, and he's out of there. Now, you say, well, what's the danger of teachers being a little more submissive to their students? Here's the danger. Have you ever heard of Herbert George Wells? He wrote a book called The Time Machine. All right? And in that book, they have the Eloi and the Morlocks. Well, let me tell you something. It didn't turn out too good for the Eloi. Read the book, you'll find out. Our society is gravitating more and more to the Eloi society. And that's very dangerous. And I think if you really think that through, you'll begin to realize what I've just said. Okay? Now then, I saw the video and was a bit confused as to why everyone was so inspired by him. Well, I was kind of confused too. Here's a high school dropout trying to get his education. Now he's dropping an honor challenge on a teacher. Not the wisest of moves. Okay? A lot of what he said simply came off as babbling or blatantly obvious. Well, a lot of what he said came out to be arrogant too. He really was presumptuous of his credentials, and he shouldn't have been. He really screwed up on this one. I've heard speeches like this from the high school I came from. I've heard this both in high school and college myself. I've watched YouTube videos about this. I've read articles about this. Not just about Jeff Bliss, but others who have done the same thing. So yes. When I was in high school, I had my own debates with teachers, albeit more privately. And I've had my debates with them too, but I actually brought some credentials when I went after them. When I debated my college accounting teacher, I brought the FASB books and said, look, you're not teaching out of this textbook. Here's the stuff you're teaching out of, and I'll happily read it to you. And I actually did a statistical analysis of all of my peers in that class, showing that their poor grades were directly related to the material he was covering that he didn't give us access to. That was a poor teaching thing, and when I put it to the administration, they fired him. End of story. When I went after my geometry teacher from high school, I flat out told him that Euclid's Elements did a better job of teaching me than he did, And I didn't understand why he didn't present that material to us. We could have gotten it. We could have ordered it. So on and so forth. He disagreed with me, and that was the end of it. But I was putting my credentials on Euclid, not myself. I didn't do that good in geometry, but Euclid did. And Euclid was a far better teacher than what this guy was. I was saying that Euclid taught better than my geometry teacher. And that was a fact. He didn't like that too much. I didn't care. Anyway. Ultimately, I think this video inspired people because it made them think of all that's wrong with public education. Now, the thing is that after I had my debate with my geometry teacher, I said, look, I'm going to put this all over YouTube, and I'm going to let people decide for themselves. Who's the better teacher, you or Euclid? And that's exactly what I did. So, anyway, there is a lot of stuff wrong with public education. But there's also a lot of right with public education, too. It just depends on what teacher you get a hold of. All right? Ultimately, I think this video inspired people because it made them think of all that's wrong with public education and how they were glad someone was vocalizing it so strongly. Even if his argument could have been more intelligently made. His argument very much so could have been more intelligently made. And the thing is, you can understand the vocalization of the problems of school, but you have to have them vocalized with somebody either who possesses credentials or who could present credentials that are just as strong as what they would have had if, well, you get the idea. In other words, you're relying either on your credentials or somebody else's credentials, but you're relying on some kind of credentials to go after this. Jeff Bliss did neither one. Okay? I do think you're wrong about the video having all the credentials and Jeff Bliss having none. I was a little confused by that statement, but alright. To a point. The teacher is barely seen in this video. That's true. I agree with that. And is barely heard other than a few mutters about how she wanted Jeff Bliss to leave. Again, I agree. There's not merely enough information to make a proper decision on her. I agree somewhat. I could make a semi-accurate assessment, but not a total one. Okay? It wasn't until he hit the news and a bunch of information sprouted up on him that anyone but the most dedicated researchers could have really told for themselves. Well, I'm not entirely in agreement with you, but yeah, I have to say there was to make a definite conclusion. There was enough information to make a hypothesis, but not a definite conclusion. I still would have wanted to know more, even though I came up with a conclusion of my own. Despite them having no idea who he was or any idea of his credentials. Why is this? Because what he was saying struck home with them. Of course it struck home with them, but he didn't have the credentials to say it. And like I said, it wasn't that he didn't have his own credentials, he didn't bring up anybody else's either. And that's where he lost his argument. Okay? They lied in the viewer's own experiences with poor quality teachers and a certain need to see something done about it. Or at least to live vicariously through him as he scolded a bad teacher of his, just like many viewers probably would have liked to have done with their least favorite teachers. This is kind of an interesting point. Okay, so what you're saying here in essence is that they related to Jeff Bliss, and I kind of related to him too. I'll give you that one. We all kind of related to Jeff Bliss. We all wanted to tell our teachers to kiss off. I've had a couple of opportunities to do it, and not everybody did. Not everybody is bold and brave enough to do something like that. But when I told these teachers to blow off, I brought credentials with me. I said, look, Euclid basically is a better teacher than you. And when it came to the accounting teacher, I said, look, you should have supplied us with this kind of material because you expect us to know it, and you didn't give us this material to study. And that's wrong. So I was able to back up all my claims. I didn't come in with just myself. I came in with materials to go along with it. That's the difference. Okay? Now, I'm going to stop this video right here because this is getting long, and I will tell you more in my next video, so stay tuned.